I think one of the things that we've seen a lot in biohacking projects is a lot of great ideas, but not a lot of follow through, or at least like it doesn't get published. So we don't know what's successful or dangerous or whatever or safe folks are being with their projects. And just a little bit goes a long way in this sort of situation. So creating some sort of repository where not only can people share protocols, but they can share outcomes.
Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're here with one of my favorite people, Alex Pearlman. She is a bioethicist, and she's been ethicizing for many years with our community. So I'm really happy to introduce her. We met at Biohack the Planet maybe some years ago, but immediately I just knew that she was definitely a person to approach and to come talk to, because she's very insightful about the community, and she has all these great nuggets of information for biohackers and the ethics surrounding them. So every year we have the great pleasure of bringing her back to Biohack the Planet and just chatting about bioethics, which is a huge part of what we do. So welcome, Alex.
Thank you. Thanks, Esther. That's really nice. And I just in my mind was remembering when we met at Biohack the Planet in the back of the auditorium, and it was just the funnest time. And I really miss that, and we're here on the video, and I mean, we don't live that far away from each other, which is also just sad. We can't hang out. It makes me really upset, but I'm glad to have the opportunity to chat and talk through some of the issues surrounding ethics in the community and some of the research I've been working on.
Awesome, thanks. So yeah, let's dive into it. Can you give a little bit more of your background of, where you've come from and what got you interested in this, and then maybe give a little insight about what you're doing right now?
Sure, yeah. Okay, so I'm not just a bioethicist. Actually, I'm also a journalist, and I've been a reporter for a really long time. And I started out in my career as a human rights reporter, and I covered international human rights for a long time. And one of the things that I encountered most in my work was open access and access to information issues. So I wrote a lot about folks who were living in countries where the internet was blocked or where they couldn't access information. And so I got really taken with that as an issue, and that internet access and access to information, access to speech are things that are really close to my heart. It's something that I care about deeply in my coverage. And I think that, when I was writing about that 10 years ago or more, it wasn't a big issue, and it really is now. But that sort of led me into just technology in general. And I was writing about technology a lot, various other issues in technology, in human rights. And then CRISPR became a big news headline. And I was like, wow, this is going to be a major technology that is going to upend human life as we know it. And I should probably learn more about that. So I actually went and got my master's degree in bioethics because I wanted to really look closely at the ways that CRISPR and other genome editing technologies and synthetic biology were not only going to be used for research purposes, but also by individuals for individual use, like human enhancement, or growing crops or fixing dogs, whatever the case may be. And so that brought me to biohacking. And I realized very quickly that this was a community that was just emerging. And although it had sort of been around for a decade or so, and that DIY bio had really been, something that was growing, hobbyists that were, establishing themselves, community labs were growing. Recently, there's just been an explosion of interest. And I mean,
Totally.
you can't deny that the growth has been extraordinary. And so I really feel lucky to have been, I feel like I came in at the right time and have really witnessed this growth with the community and know a lot of the original players and have worked with them for years now. And so I've looked a lot at the policy issues and the ethics that affect this community in particular, people who use gene editing and genetic technologies for themselves.
Awesome. Fantastic. So I recently read a paper that you were author in. Can you tell me a little bit more about kind of what's going on now? Because the paper was focused on just like what DIY biologists have been doing and what kind of initiatives have been taken, especially in the pandemic. So maybe you can give like a very surface level of like what you wrote about, and then dive into some of the fine meat of it.
Sure. Yeah. So thanks for reading my paper, because also you're probably one of like 9 people who are ever going to read this paper, like all academic papers, right? So
Yeah.
that makes me feel good. Um, yeah. So it was with a bunch of colleagues who are folks at various institutions and places, research organizations around the country, and a couple of other biohackers too. We started as a reading group. And so this was our first publication together after actually like hanging out on Zoom for like the past 3 years, which is really exciting. But the paper takes a look at sort of the differences between establishment and non-establishment. And by that, we mean the open science community, including biohackers, approaches to trust architecture. And so, what we mean by that is systems that tell the public and regulators that the work and science and research that's going on is trustworthy, and safe and ethical. And so there is a lot of work going on within the community. And I was involved in an exercise at the Global Community Bio Summit, which is hosted by the Community Bio Initiative at MIT, where I'm a research affiliate, in coming up with a draft document of ethical questions that could be used as a guideline. So that's one system that is being developed. It's very much still in flux, and it really can be tailored to your use, however you want to use it. And then the other example that we offer in the paper is the example of Joggle, just one giant lab, which is a organizing platform and sort of collaborative research place on the internet that mostly is organized on Slack during the pandemic, was coming up with a bunch of different projects where members of the DIY bio, community bio, like ecosystems, were meeting together to work side by side on solutions related to the pandemic. And while that was going on, members were also creating like a code of conduct and a biosafety board, and bringing in really knowledgeable experts from within the community, and also folks who were supportive from outside the community, to really like create an architecture where the projects on Joggle could be considered having gone through some sort of like review process. And that was a really important step.
Right. So, what kind of people were involved with these projects? And can you kind of give us a couple of projects that came to mind that were part of
Yeah,
this project?
so a bunch of different kinds of people. So I think Joggle is really interesting because it really was like a meeting of minds of all different levels. So there were folks who were high school students from North America. There were people who were, members of the DIY scene in France, because Joggle itself is headquartered in France. There were people like research scientists from like Greece and Latin America. There were folks who were involved at the US CDC, which is something like very cool. Like, so literally all levels. It was like from like regulatory to academic research to industry to biohackers, there was like a huge spectrum. And I found it really amazing that all these different kinds of people could work together on a bunch of different projects, including like creating diagnostic tests for COVID. There was another project that was trying to create open source syringe pumps for the hospital system in France. like there was like there's also, I mean, there's hundreds of projects listed on Joggle. I think there's something like 190 something projects, and like, definitely double check for yourself. But I don't know off the top of my head, but definitely probably close to 200 different types of projects.
Yeah, and some of them were very successful, and they got actually funded by government, right?
Yeah, and it's one or two were semifinalists for the X Prize, and
Wow.
so that's like I would say that's like a fairly successful level for a DIY project.
Totally. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yes. So in the actual, so in your paper, I was reading about some of the solutions. Like we draw some parallels between. So Joggle did a really great job of coalescing a bunch of DIY scientists and just coming together for a singular cause, and it really broke down these silos of IP and everything that surrounded like COVID and SARS, right? So you were drawing parallels of, okay, if this can actually happen in real time, how can we adapt this to our current model of biohacking, especially in the United States? And you did definitely mention like developing like a trust architecture. So right now it's kind of like the technology is super hot. There's lots of people working on it in industry, in academics, and also us. So what do you propose we do to develop like a trust architecture or like some kind of infrastructure to like you know lead to self-governance? Or I mean, like, should we even loop in like policymakers? Like, what's going on in this space right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great question, and I'm not sure is the short answer. I don't know. There are a lot of possibilities, and I think that this is one of the most important places where the community needs to decide for itself what its red lines are. I mean, so like the bare minimum kind of trust architecture, which, by the way, I have to say is a phrase that my friend Lisa Rasmussen, who's the lead author on that paper, uses and introduced to me. And I like want to give her credit because she's awesome. And I also love that phrase. But, just saying like, no, we're not okay with XYZ behavior, and we're going to decide that, and we're not going to, move forward with people or, who are behaving badly that cross XYZ line. But I think on an individual level, it's really important for people who are engaged in biohacking or other like DIY bio um, projects, and especially ones that have a focus that's biomedical, to be as transparent as possible about what they're doing and how they're collecting data and where they're putting it. I think one of the things that we've seen a lot in biohacking projects is a lot of great ideas, but not a lot of follow through, or at least like it doesn't get published. So we don't know what successful or dangerous or whatever or safe folks are being with their projects. And just a little bit goes a long way in this sort of situation. So creating some sort of repository where not only can people share protocols, but they can share outcomes. They can share, they can ask each other questions. We've talked a lot about the crisis of peer review in science just in general, but it's like biohacking isn't immune to that problem. Folks aren't validating each other's work. And so even that sort of like openness and trust and sharing and transparency that is supposed to be sort of like the backbone of the open source movement sometimes falls by the wayside. I think sometimes out of just sheer excitement, people are just so excited about their projects that, it takes time. Like people don't want to sit down and like write a whole thing, like report, because it's not going in a journal. Maybe there should be a journal, like there are so many ways that these behaviors can take place, that a trust architecture can take root. It's really up to the community to decide how that's going to move forward. And I'm always the person who's like, you know what, here are a lot of suggestions, y'all choose one.
Totally. And, maybe one day, in a conference or something, that we can bring together a couple of thought leaders and be like, okay, I think this might be like a pretty good like measure of how we should, standardize things, because we're a very young community. I don't think, all of us have like labs in our house or anything, but we're definitely like thinking about things, especially ethically. Like obviously, self-experimentation is a huge part of biohacking. And also we're thinking about like making dinosaurs or Pokemon. So also animal experimentation is also like in the mix too, which are like very in industry and in academic practices. Those are very highly ethical topics that we kind of satellite around. We're like, well, as biohackers, we can do such thing. The technology exists. So it's really up to us to try and figure out what's ethical, what's not, and how to conduct science in a very open and very transparent manner, like you said. I totally agree with that.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So my question is to you: can you give advice to the group?
Yeah, so I would love to give advice to the group. It just depends on what kind of advice it is. So, I think that there are a lot of bioethicists out there who maybe get a bad rep from the community for what they maybe post on Twitter or write in articles. But the truth is, people's doors are always open. And I would suggest that if you need bioethics advice about a project or a question or a concern or, basically anything, just want to have a chat about philosophy, my door is always open, but I don't have a institution behind me. So I'm an independent writer, and I am a consulting bioethicist for a number of institutions where I work on grants with collaborators, but I am not an employee of an institution. And so can be dangerous for me to give advice about ethics, especially for projects that are, in a legal gray area or in an ethical gray area. So, if you need a list of names of people that you can approach safely with questions, like I would be happy to provide that. But if you also need or want questions about or answers about sort of like regulations, or you want ethics resources, papers about specific topics, you want to start doing your own research and just need like a nudge in the right direction, like I am 100% here for that. And anyone should feel free to contact me. I'm very easy to find. So yeah, I love to give advice and I love to talk about these issues. And unfortunately, like I can't, tell people that it's okay to make a dinosaur chicken. Like I just can't.
You heard that here. Okay. Thanks, Alex, so much. Really, really appreciate it. Yeah, Alex is obviously a treasure trove of information, and she can find these, she's our truffle pig and knows how to find these like nuggets of information throughout the internet. And sometimes we're just very lost about, what we can and cannot do. So please feel free to reach out to her. Her information will be either in the group description or on the YouTube channel. So yeah, I really hope that you can come to her as a source, because she's a very open and honest person, and she'll tell you like it is. So that's why I love having her around.
Well, I appreciate that, the kind words. I'm just trying to like live my life and meet some weird people and help do cool science. So if we can all do that together, that's great.
Awesome. Yeah, so if you are interested in pitching a proposal to get on one of these fireside chats with me, feel free to email me, and be sure to join the Facebook community for the Biohacking and Genetic Engineering Design Group, also in the links below. And then Alex, can you share that paper, or is it behind a paywall?
It's behind a paywall, but I can share it with anyone who asks me for it directly. So I'm not allowed to post it on the internet. Mm-hmm. And I otherwise would if it weren't for the many collaborators who are employed by institutions and whom I respect too much to step on their toes like that. But yes, anyone who wants to read about trust architecture in DIY bio and community biohacking should just please email me or message me, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, email, whatever. I will send you the paper.
Awesome. Okay. Thanks so much, Alex. And we'll catch everybody later. Okay.
All right. Talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.